So I wanted to move on. Obviously, recently, this issue's been going on nationally, but it did somewhat come to the fore locally. A very good friend of yours, I know, Corey Beirne, made a post about last month. Let me bring it up real quick. Anyway, I know you
I
and Corey.
remember that now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know you and Corey Beirne are really, really close friends. So I hope that I'm not, you know, trying to get in the way of your close relationship. But he posted on January
Appreciate that.
24th. Huh?
I appreciate that.
Good, good. So yeah, this post was done on January 24th by Corey Beirne, who is the current District 10 McLean County Board member, which you also represented District 10. And this was after the Trump administration came out with an official directive saying that basically rescinding previous directives that DHS will no longer avoid targeting schools, hospitals, places of worship, stuff like that, which they, for a long time, I mean, for decades, they had avoided that. And so a lot of people, I think, reasonably are concerned that there's going to start being immigration raids in schools. So Corey Beirne, who's also a school teacher, he said, quote, there is a well justified and growing concern about potential immigration raids in our country. The news that schools and places of worship, among others, are now acceptable places to conduct raids is reprehensible and awful. He spoke with our McLean County Sheriff, Matt Lane, and he's assured that the Sheriff's Department will not assist ICE in conducting raids on local schools. And people can further read this if they want. And then, of course, our local insurrection radio, Cities 92.9, basically misrepresented what he said and what the sheriff said by claiming that the sheriff is said he wasn't going to enforce any immigration laws or anything like that, and there was some back and forth. What did you think about this whole conversation around this issue locally, around ICE targeting schools, things like that?
Well, remember, I mean, if I recall it correctly, Zach, and I'm not trying to misrepresent facts, okay? But if I recall it correctly, Sheriff Lane also came out with a statement, and he said, "This is what I actually said, okay? To be clear to everybody, this is what I intend to do, okay?" And I think he said something to the extent, "I intend to follow the law." Okay, well, you know, what the law is everybody will debate about, but yes, I believe that what listen,
So I
reporters
have his
nowadays
statement.
are,
Can I read off? Can I read off the sheriff's statement real quick
yeah, would you
for everyone?
please?
Yeah, so he released his own statement saying, quote, at no time have I or anyone from my office stated that we would refuse to assist federal agencies on operations involving criminal matters that threaten public safety. I am aware of federal and state laws that will be driving the enforcement action from my office. Simply put, the McLean County Sheriff's Office will be enforcing the law. I would encourage and expect news outlets or anyone seeking what my position is or isn't on a particular subject to go straight to the source and not draw their own conclusions. I mean, I'm not sure how this is different than what Beirne stated. Beirne didn't state that the sheriff wasn't going to enforce laws or anything like that. He just said that they're not going to assist in raiding schools.
Well, I look at it as being different. I mean, he didn't say he could have came out and said, "Yes, that's exactly what I told Corey Burney. That's 100% correct." And for anybody to think that I would do anything different would be a misstatement of my intentions and what I plan to do. Now, what he came out and said was, "Listen, I'm going to follow the law." That's what he said. Okay, I'm going
But
to,
he
and
also
you
didn't
read
say that
that.
he was being misrepresented.
You read what he said. No,
Yeah,
but
he
then
didn't
what
say that
Cities
he was being
92
misrepresented.
what Cities 92.9 came in and did. And then they said, well, wait a minute. He said he's not going to enforce any immigration law. I mean, they basically broadened what they thought he was saying.
Yeah, they did a
And
straw person fallacy.
well, okay, yeah, okay. But I mean, but in this age where we live in nowadays, okay, it's just like reporters just got to jump and get that story out there first. It happens on the left, it happens on the right, and then they don't check back. They fill the facts in later. Okay, I mean, but she should have. I mean, I was I received an email from her saying I did check with the sheriff. Okay, well, if you read her article, it doesn't really sound like she checked with the sheriff. Okay, I mean, I
Yes,
don't know.
who
Okay,
specifically are you talking about? I just want to make sure.
the reporter that wrote that, because I went up on my
For Insurrection
because
Radio? The reporter for Insurrection Radio said that.
I'm not going to call it insurrection radio, but I
Well,
mean
I'm not going to police your language. I'm just making sure you're talking about the reporter for Insurrection
yeah,
Radio.
yes, the reporter
Okay.
for Cities 92.9. And I came out with a criticism of that article, of the Cities 92.9 article. I said I don't think that's exactly what you're trying to say the sheriff said there is not what the sheriff said, okay? And that's why the sheriff said, if you have any questions about what my policy is, you should call me first before you report on what my policy is, okay? I think the sheriff will have to figure out, just like every sheriff in the state of Illinois will have to figure out. And that's why you have a federal lawsuit up in the Northern District about how this is going to be sorted out. Where does federal immigration law fit in with local government and the Trust Act, and how you're going to what law prevails when a sheriff is asked to do certain things. Okay, I think because if you're a law enforcement officer in the state of Illinois, you do have a conflict. Okay, you've got your Illinois Trust Act saying you've got to do it exactly like this. And I'm not an expert on the Trust Act or anything else. Okay, but you got to do it exactly like this. And federal law, which might say, no, this is what you do. Okay. And if there's that conflict, the court's going to have to resolve it. If you're a law enforcement officer, you're kind of stuck, because if you go this direction, you might get a lawsuit from the state. If you go this direction, you might get a lawsuit from the federal government. So you've got to get it sorted out how that's going to happen.
Yeah, so I mean, I am more familiar with the Trust Act. I helped lobby to get it passed and other laws like that. And the Trust Act, one, it's resting on the principle that, according to the U.S. Constitution, immigration is the sole realm of the federal government. Right? The states cannot pass immigration laws on their own. They can't enforce immigration laws on their own, etc. That's federalism. That's the beautiful system that we have. And so it's saying, look, we're going to leave it to the federal government to do this, to engage in immigration enforcement. Now, if you come to us and you have a warrant signed by a judge, which means that you have probable cause to, take someone who's undocumented into custody, or even someone who is, any immigrant into custody, then okay, then we will obviously follow that because we have to. But if you don't have something that's signed by a warrant signed by a judge, then no, we're not going to expend our resources to help to assist you when it's clear you don't have probable cause. I mean, that's the main thing. There's other things in the Trust Act. That's the main thing that the Trust Act is saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I mean,
and where that issue would come up is, in my opinion, I don't do criminal defense law, and I don't do I've never been a prosecutor, but I mean, where that issue comes up though is does that Trust Act in any way impede the enforcement of federal law in any way? And that's the issue that the court's going to have to resolve. I know you're looking up in this. I can see your facial expressions. That you think, well, it doesn't impede it in any way. All right, well, there is an issue that it does impede it. It does impede it in some ways, and that's why the Department of Justice has taken the state of Illinois to court in the Northern District. So no, here's the way federal law is going. Here's the way federal law is going to be enforced. Here's what you're expected to do. If there's any conflict, federal law prevails. So to eliminate that there would ever be a sheriff would be put in a position, or a police officer would be put in a position that he's ever in a conflict between his state and the federal government, it needs to be clarified. Here's what you're going to do.
Yeah, so do you agree that, our basic due process rights technically impede law enforcement, right? There's restrictions that law enforcement cannot do because we have certain due process rights.
I think that's always been true in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, you've always had, I don't think that you can go and just do anything.
The Trust Act is saying, you have to have probable cause, which is a constitutional standard. So it's not impeding it in some type of unconstitutional way. It's just saying you need to go get a warrant signed by a judge. I guess I don't understand why the federal government's so lazy that it can't just go to a judge and get a warrant.
If federal law doesn't require that, I mean, I don't know what federal law requires in immigration enforcement. I don't know what the full import of federal law is on immigration enforcement.
Well,
There are a
again,
lot of
the state law is just saying you need to have sufficient probable cause and you need to go to a judge. So
but then you could get the lawyers and the sheriffs and the law enforcement and everybody else trying to dispute what is probable cause too. Okay, I mean, so you say probable cause has to meet these standards, and the federal government says probable cause only requires this, and so and
yeah, but no,
only,
the state would defer to the federal probable cause because it's all they're saying is if you need to have a warrant signed by a federal judge. We're not going to question that federal judge. We're not going to get our lawyers involved, etc. We're just saying that you need to go through the process to get a warrant signed by a federal judge. So that there's nothing in the Trust Act. There's nothing in the Trust Act that
I don't know. What I'm saying is I don't know what federal immigration law says in their requirements of enforcement. Okay, I mean I'm not an expert on it. What does federal immigration law say? You have to do this, or you have to do that, or you have to do that. All I can tell you is that the DOJ apparently thinks there's a conflict. And that's why there's a lawsuit sitting in the Northern District. And there will be a judge in the appellate courts that will sort it out. But until that gets sorted out, I mean, you do leave local law enforcement in somewhat of a quandary as to what direction they go.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's clear. You just need to have a warrant signed by a judge, which is, a pretty simple standard to follow. Either they have the warrant or they don't have the warrant. I mean, that's kind of the main issue with that.
If federal immigration law requires a different type of warrant or a different type of probable cause than what Illinois contemplates in the Trust Act, isn't there a conflict?
No, because the Trust Act says that we defer to federal law. They defer to the judge in the federal law system.
That might be the way you're looking at it. Okay, I'm not saying that might be the way you're looking at it, but there are plenty of lawyers advising sheriffs around the state that saying, "Listen, we got to be careful here." Okay, because if we go this direction, we could be subject to this, or if we go that direction, we got to be subject to this. In fact, I mean, if I'm a lawyer and I were advising a sheriff's department or a state's attorney's office, I would welcome the district court in the Northern District and the appellate courts to tell me what can I do and what can I not do. Will you make it clear for me so I don't have to sit there and try to figure it out?
It's kind of concerning to me that we have, sheriffs and state's attorneys that don't understand how to interpret the laws or don't understand how laws are when it's pretty clear that you just need to that's kind of concerning to me actually that you have these people that are enforcing the laws but they don't understand them when it's literally you show up with a piece of paper that has a judge's signature on it, a federal judge's signature on it, and then you can assist in any way after that. That's the extent of the restriction.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, but I mean, I wish law were always that clear. It never. I mean,
well, I'm not a lawyer, and I helped get this law passed, and I was able to understand it. So
law isn't always clear as mud. I mean, law sometimes is clear as mud. Okay, and that's the dilemma that I think Sheriff Lane or any sheriff is in, is that if their attorneys perceive that there's a conflict between the two, okay, and they say you can't do this or that, okay, if their attorneys perceive it that way and they don't act, I mean, to me, the attorney would have to take the view that federal law always supersedes state law, okay, and that's the view. That would be the view I would take. Now, I can't tell you how they're reading the Trust Act. I can't tell you how they're reading some of these laws, but that's what's going on.